My name is Jessie Benash. I have been doing, I think this is my 4th or 5th time here. I was a keynote speaker one year, which was crazy. So I'm always excited though when I get to come back. And I don't ever recommend, like if you're doing this as a human, like to have your family in the very front row, because like all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I had tears, like it was awful. I mean, it wasn't, but like there was a moment where the comment card was like, she's too emotional. I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, like my little girl and boy are sitting there looking at me, and it just all came flooding back. So it's easier for me to talk to people that I don't know sometimes instead of people I do. So last month, I did a speaking engagement, and normally I get like an hour, hour and 15. They took my story and crunched it into like 5 minutes and like really focused on one part of it for like it was like a distracted driving thing that was held in Appleton. So that was crazy, it was amazing. But I'm excited to have my full hour back to actually talk about all the things. So if you have questions or anything like that, I'm very chill. Please feel free to ask. It's not like a note-taking type session at all. So my story starts back when I was in high school. It was the last day of school of my sophomore year, and I had, life was good. I just found out I had made varsity cheerleading. I was finally dating this like hot running back from the football team that I really liked. The kind where like, oh, let's go to the park and I'm gonna push you on the swings. Like, but like it was happening. It was like awesome. So that night I was supposed to meet him later on at a party, but my friends wanted me to go with them to a park in Janesville, and we were gonna go ride some motorcycles with some friends that they were meeting. So we went out for a ride and came back to the car, and I was like, I think I'm just gonna stay here. I'm good. And they're like, no, like you have to come with. I'm like, no, really, guys, like I'm good. We had some drinks, so I was like, I'm just gonna, chill here, have a drink, I'll be good. They were persistent, and next thing I knew, they had brought someone back for me so that I could ride also. So finally I was like, okay, next thing I know, I'm on the back of a bike of, someone I don't even know, and my overthinking, anxious mind is like, does he have a girlfriend? Is my boyfriend gonna be mad? Like all these thoughts, but tried to just push him down, and as we were leaving the park, there was another bike that joined us. So there was 4 of us, 4 bikes. My friends were on the first 2, and then I was on a bike, and then the other guy. And as we were leaving, all of a sudden 2 cars came up behind us, and people got out of the cars, and they started a fight with the drivers of the 2 motorcycles that my friends were on. And next thing I knew, like they took off, and we took off right after them. I, of course, start crying. I'm like, please, just let me off. Like, I don't want to be a part of this. He's like, just hold on, close your eyes, like it'll be over soon. We're going like 70 miles an hour in town, like in a 35, so like super scary. One of the last things I remember was getting to this stoplight, and the 2 bikes that my friends were on turned left, and we didn't follow, we went straight. And the cars, instead of chasing the 2 that they were after, chased us instead. So now all of a sudden we're out on these county roads, and I don't remember much after this point, but at one point our bikes collided, and the cars were so close behind us that the first car swerved to miss me, ran over my foot, and then went down into the ditch where he ended up running over the guy I was riding with, which killed him. The other guy was on the other side of the road, and he ended up with like severe permanent brain damage. So out of the 3 of us, I was the lucky one. like I said, I thank God that I don't remember all of the details. I've met quite a few people that ended up out at the scene and had seen some pretty, gruesome things that I'm grateful that I don't remember. So you have to remember, dating myself here, but this was 1994, so there wasn't cell phones and there wasn't all of those things, right? So my friends drove around looking for me for hours. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know what had happened to me. One of my friends that I was with had dropped something off at my house, and they noticed my mom was on the phone, but had no idea. It was the hospital, and they were calling because they had to do emergency surgery to reattach my foot. It was basically just hanging there with, like some tendons attached. So they took muscle from my stomach, they took skin from my side. I broke my nose in 2 spots. I broke my cheekbone from where my sunglasses sit and how hard I had impacted. I was not wearing a helmet. I had bleeding on my brain. I had fractured my skull. So I was in pretty bad shape. And the peer pressure part of it, I think it took me a while to realize what that role played. And even it took me a while to realize how much me having a couple drinks also come into play with that. Obviously I could have never imagined what would have happened, but putting myself in the situations that I was in and not being surrounded by people that were helping me to get out of the situation. I have a 15-year-old daughter right now, and just thinking about the parallels of our lives it's been definitely a more crazy year this year with it. So jump back, sorry, I jumped 30 years ahead, but so I was in the ICU for about 10 days, and then I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. When I got home, I had a hospital bed in my living room, and that was how my summer was spent. Not so glamorous like I had planned on. I really quickly found out who my friends were and which ones were around just when I could do all the fun things. So my hot running back boyfriend came over. I remember it was the night that O.J. Simpson was in the white Jeep. I'm staring at this white Jeep, not realizing the significance of it as my boyfriend was telling me that he couldn't go out with someone that couldn't do anything. So I was miserable. I was sad. This was my summer, and I had no one, I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't do anything. I had an ambulance that would have to come pick me up every day to take me to the hospital to have my foot cleaned out. They didn't give me much likeliness to be able to keep my foot, and I was one of those kids where it was tell me I can't, I'll show you. So I did. When I went back I did end up going back to school that fall, but I was in a wheelchair. And, really hard to go from being that girl that was on top of the pyramid to now the girl that was in the wheelchair. And when I switched to crutches, I don't know if any of you have ever been on crutches. I mean, they suck, but they suck worse when the floors are wet. And when you live in Wisconsin, floors get wet a lot, right? It's snowy, it's rainy. So I would often fall down, and my pride would just go right with it. And I was already angry at this world. I didn't understand why did this happen to me? So I kind of stopped going to school very often. It got to the point where I stopped calling my mom to ask her to come home, and I just said, I'm leaving. Or I would just go out the door. I didn't care anymore. I had so many thoughts and like guilt and shame and, survivor's guilt. Why did I live? Like all of these things going on, and I didn't know how to process it. My life was like out of control, and I remember my mom making an appointment for me to go see like a psychiatrist, and I was like, oh, isn't that where you have to like lay down on the couch and like the guy has like the yellow legal pad? And I was like, oh, it won't be that bad, like just go try it. And I go in there, and like, I kid you not, dude has this black couch, and he's like, get comfy, and he had a yellow legal pad. I was like, oh, no, I'm out. Like, I can't do this. And like, just did not click. Like, he was too serious and just wasn't my thing. They tried meds, which, and instead of feeling all my feelings, then all of a sudden I couldn't feel anything, and I would be like, hi, like happy and all this, and I was like, but I don't feel happy, but my emotions are making me happy, and I really struggled with that. On top of I hate life and I still don't want to go to school. So I eventually ended up having to go to an alternative school. And if you know anything about alternative schools, a lot of times people are like, oh, that's like for the bad kids. And I'm like, okay, like I don't really know what that means, but. So I went down there, and it was crazy because I swear there was like 217 steps to get into this building. Like I had to go up the steps, and then it was in an old like community center, and like they used to have like I think they might still have roller skating in there, and like, so it wasn't just up one flight, it was up like 2 or 3 flights of stairs to get to this room. So like, again, not looking forward to doing that every day. So I started going, and but obviously, like, the problems didn't change, so I kind of stopped going there too. To the point where, my mom was like, maybe you just need to get your GED, and I was like, excuse me, you don't think I can graduate high school? And again, nothing against like people that get their GED. I actually think it's almost harder to get your GED because it's so much self-motivation and all of that. But for whatever reason in my 16, 17-year-old mind, I was like, my mom doesn't believe in me all of a sudden. Coupled with, I had this teacher who was amazing. He used to make me so mad, but I remember him calling me and being like, are you coming to school today? I'm like, nope. And he's like, are you sure about that? Yep. He's like, well, I'm going to come over then. And I'm like, excuse me? You're going to do what? I'm like, you can't come over. He's like, watch me. He's like, I'll be there shortly, and I'm going to come get you. And I was like, no, fine, I'll come, but like, I am stopping to get like a cappuccino or something first. Like, I'd had to have some control over the situation. So I did start going, and we had this guidance counselor that would come down like every Thursday. So like, I quickly began to realize that like all the kids I was with, like none of them were bad kids. Like, we all had, excuse my language, like we all had shit going on, right? And like, normal school wasn't allowing us to be able to learn and process all this stuff going on. So this guidance counselor would come down and my teacher, and like we would just sit and talk about like what is going on with us, like what are we dealing with? And we were all dealing with so much stuff that like we just needed a safe space to be, that when we could learn, we had a way to do it. So eventually I ended up like getting caught back up to the point where I was able to graduate with my class, which was huge. Like I still was going through tons of medical stuff. Even like when I went to prom, like I still had like a walking boot on, and it was like bright, ugly blue, but the dress store like, wrapped black fabric around it so that, it would blend in a little better with my dress. And like one of, kind of jumping back for a second, but one of the friends that was on the other bike she was my best friend. And, even to this day, she struggles with the guilt that she has from that night. But she quit her job and she took care of me. Like my parents paid her not much at all to be there and do things that 16-year-old girls should not have to do with their 15-year-old friends, but she was a trooper. And so, she would take care of me whatever I needed. She was my girl. So when I wasn't at school, at the high school, just felt very disconnected from a lot of my friends and things like that. And then when I graduated from that, I ended up with this shoe, and it looked like a Cabbage Patch Kid shoe. It was like this. I think my mom might have it somewhere, and I really need to bring it with when I do this, because when I tell you guys this was bad, it was so bad. And we lived in this little small town, so I remember making them circle again, because the thing was to go stop in the parking lot and then see what you were going to do for that night. And I was like, I can't. Have you seen this? I can't go in there. Everyone's going to laugh at me. So finally, I've learned throughout my life, if I laugh at myself first, then other people won't laugh as much. And people bless you. I way overthink things, and people aren't as mean as I think they're going to be. So, when I went up, I was like, I know you're jealous that I have Cabbage Patch Kid shoe and you don't. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, laughed, and then we just moved on with life. It was not as big of a deal as I made it out to be. While I was at school, I started thinking about college and things like that, and I remember meeting with this organization and did all this testing, and they were like, we think you can only make it at a 2-year school. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll give that a shot. So I went to MATC for real estate. I was actually working in an appraisal office at the time, so I could leave school early and work credit kind of thing. And so it was a year program, got basically straight A's. It was easy for me. And I was like, oh, cool. But then I took this marriage and family and criminology class, and I was blown away. I was like, wait, what? You can actually like what you're going to school for? I'm so confused. So I started taking more of those classes, and eventually I transferred to UW-Whitewater, and in social work, found that was my passion. And I made the dean's list every single semester because I loved what I was going to school for. So being able to graduate from somewhere where someone basically told you you'll never be able to do it was huge. That meant a lot to me. Got hired after graduation, started working in residential treatment for kids, because they were like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. I was like, bring it, let's go. So I worked for a year and was like, you know what, I really want my master's. I want to be that therapist for someone else where different, not guidance counselor, but I want to be that person. So I had never taken an ACT, SAT, 3-letter acronym test, not doing it. So I was like, shoot, what am I going to do? So I applied to UW-Madison, and I just told them my story. And I said, here's where I was, and here's where I am now, and I just really want to be a part of this program, and I want to get more, and do more, and be more. And somehow, crazily, they let me in, and I ended up getting my master's in social work, and eventually, went on to get my license and become that therapist that I always wanted to be. Absolutely, shout out to those therapists, man. And, just getting to go to school with something I was already working in and learn, it was the easiest thing I'd ever done. and it felt so good. But I was like angry, like that someone would think that because they were in this position of power, that they could tell me what I could and couldn't do. Shame on me for like grabbing it, holding on to it, snuggling up with it, and like believing it, but it still happens, you still hear about this. Even more crazily, I'm jumping ahead like 20 years at the moment, but I got asked to be an adjunct teacher or professor at UW-Whitewater. So now, like, I want to go back and be like, I teach where you told me I couldn't learn. Tell me more about your job and how good you are at it. I've never done that, but I do think about it, like, probably more than I should sometimes, but, you'd be surprised. So I share a part of that with my students, and how many students will still tell me that there are people that will tell them, teachers even, oh, you won't make it in that program, or like, you won't be able to do this. It was in high school, or it was in their first semester of college, and I'm like, what is going, like, why are we, this is my sidebar, it's not really my journey, but it's my journey because it drives me crazy. So if you hear of someone, like, don't give them that power. And as kids, they're looking to learn, and they want to know that they can be whatever and whoever they want to be. So, there's been a time where I went and spoke to my colleagues at Whitewater about this. Because I'm like, just because you've been teaching math for 30 years doesn't mean you get to decide what this person can and can't do and how far they can take it. So, back to where I was in my master's, like, I had met this guy who, first date, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna marry him. Like, I was head over heels. I just loved him. And so we were together like 2 years and got married the year after I got my master's. I didn't want to have to plan a wedding and all of that at the same time, and I had to work full-time, so I couldn't go to school full-time. So I was at the part-time program, which was perfect for me. And ended up having 2 amazing kiddos. My daughter is the oldest, and then my son. But I still had a lot of issues with my foot that was going on throughout the years. I would get these infections where, hold on, I had a feeling this was going to happen. Hang with me for just a second. There we go. Sorry about that. I would have these infections, and when I would have an infection, it wasn't just like, oh, go to the doctor, get some antibiotics. It was, go to the doctor, oh, now you're gonna be admitted to the hospital, and you're gonna have a week full of IV antibiotics pumped into you with like the craziest strength of pain meds that you've ever been on. And I remember, my daughter was like 2 years old when that would happen, so my husband would have to take care of, would take care of her, and it was super hard, to be away from my life, basically. So this kind of continued on, and it, yes, my foot was there, yes, I could still do things, like I figured out how to do like sand volleyball and bowling, and there was things I could do. But it was definitely more difficult. When I was in high school, I used to, one of my favorite things to do was run. I would run from one end of town to the other with my friend. Like, that was our stress relief. And after my accident, I was never able to run again. So I didn't have that physical outlet to get rid of all of these emotions and things like that. But again, I found other ways to do it. But it just would get more difficult, and I was getting an increase in these infections. So when my son was 2, my daughter was 6, and they were going to do a surgery to take the flap that was on my foot, move it over, and add some more skin on to give me some cushion, because basically my foot was like bone on the ground. And I would have to wear these like special orthotics in my shoes, so like I couldn't wear cute shoes anymore. Even like when I graduated high school, I was out of the Cabbage Patch Kids shoe. I graduated to a tennis shoe, so I had this like blue and white striped tennis shoe and a dress shoe on. Like that was my outfit. At one point, I was finally able to at least buy like 2 different size pairs of shoes, but still cute shoes were out. It wasn't happening. So had this surgery scheduled, and like I remember carrying my son into his crib and just being like, like this is gonna make mom better, and just talking to him and all the things. And like I still just remember so well like laying him down for that last time. And so I went in the hospital, had the surgery done, and all of a sudden it was like this pain was just terrible. And they're like, oh, like we'll try to up your pain meds, all this. I did try to go home at one point, and just had an awful weekend. Went back to the doctor on Monday, and they directly admitted me into UW because the surgery didn't take. And it wasn't working. So my next option was I could have another surgery where they take, a muscle in my back and more skin, and like skin grafts, literally the most painful thing I've ever had. Like I've had 2 kids, I've had so many things, but like a skin graft is the worst. And I just went through that. I'm like, like I'm not really like a turkey. I don't think we need to like carve any more things out. Sorry, it's kind of graphic, but it's kind of like, that's literally how I felt that day. I was like, is it supposed to work like that? So they were like, the other option is to get your leg amputated. And now that was on the table when I was 15, right? And I like was terrified. Like I didn't want that. I'd worked 17 years to like keep my foot. So the thought of like not having it was huge. And, I remember my husband at the time was like, I didn't marry your leg, I married you. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna do this. So I had met with the surgeons, and I had a week, so my first surgeon had went on vacation because I wasn't supposed to be there. So I had a whole week at UW where I was basically alone and just had my own battle of emotions to go through and figure out like what is right for me. And I happened to be on the same ward as like a cancer ward, and I started asking like, who else is on this floor? Because all I literally do is sit and look around and watch people walk by, and like, yeah, a lot of these people have cancer. And, I was like, here these people are fighting for their lives, and like, I'm throwing a fit over like my leg. Like, I can do this, change this, and I can leave, and I'll be okay. So I agreed to have the surgery. I had it all set up, and I think it was the day before I was scheduled to have it, they came in and told me that my insurance wasn't going to cover it. So they're like, well, we have to move you to a different hospital. I'm like, I don't want to go to a different hospital. Like, I'm comfortable with this hospital, because every other day I was having to go into surgery so that they could like change the wound vac. So I mean, like literally everyone in the whole like OR department knew me at that point. You're like, oh, Jesse's here for the day. Like, it was wrong how many people like I knew underneath all the masks. But my surgeon came in and he's like, Jesse, you got this. Like, you're gonna be good. This is like a routine surgery. you've fought hard enough. Like, you don't have to keep fighting this. So I agreed. They came and picked me up by ambulance, took me to a hospital that was closer to where I was too. So I was able to have, my family could come more often, my kids could come and see me. And, at this point it had been like a month almost. And it was like really hard to not be with my kids. So, they would set up the iPad at night so that I could have dinner with them. And the nurses knew, like, don't go in there during this time because she's having dinner with her family. And like, it was as good as it could be, right? I would tuck the kids in every night, like, and I'm sure my 2-year-old was like, what is going on? Like, but we figured it out. So I met the new surgeon, and she told me that I had to wait 3 days because she really wanted me to think about whether or not this was the right decision. She was an amazing advocate for her patients. She was one of those where, like, not super nice to the staff, but like if you were her patient, she had your back. I remember that all of a sudden they switched the surgery like an hour earlier, and I wasn't able, like, my husband was dropping the kids off and then coming, and I was freaking out because, like, I wanted to be able to say my see you laters, and one of the nurses taught me we don't say goodbye, we say see you later. So, like, they even held the surgery until he could get there and I could say goodbye or say my see you later. So ended up, I had the surgery done. I was so weak. I had lost so much weight, like, to the point where, they were like, you have to have, like, shakes and ice cream every day. And I was like, oh, what? Like, okay, I get to have shakes and ice cream every day. Like, I was stoked. Like, not many times in your life does someone actually tell you this is what you must do. So I was pretty happy about that. But I just didn't feel like doing any. Like, I was over everything. Like, my body hurt, like, everything hurt. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to be with my babies. And I remember there was this one physical therapist, and she would come and, you never know what, like, one person says to you that makes such a difference, right? So it could be negative, where they're like, you can't do this, and we hold on to it. She did the opposite. She's like, instead of thinking of yourself being in the hospital, like, why don't you think of this as you're in rehab? And it's not the hospital anymore. And, like, just that sentence, like, she'll never know how much that one sentence meant to me. And, like, I got up and did my exercises like 3 times that day, and I had done my crutches all the way around the unit. And within, less than a week, I was out, and I was able to be home and, like, back with my family and, loving on my babies again. So, like, right after, everyone's like, oh my gosh, like, your leg looks great. Like, this is going to be awesome. I was stoked. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a running leg. I'm going to do all the things. I was so excited. I, was kicking butt in therapy. Like, it was so hard, but, like, I had one of the best, like, when I started going to outpatient. Like, she taught me, like, you will not walk with a limp. And, like, every time I was like, I physically can't do this, she's like, oh, you can. I'm like, okay, but I don't wanna. She's like, oh no, you're going to. And I had this prosthetist who, I thought was great, and everything was going so good. And about probably about 2 months into it, all of a sudden, like, it just started to change a little, and I started to struggle more, and, like, things just weren't fitting right. And I was like, gosh, I feel like I'm walking on jello. Like, it's just not secure, and I don't understand. Everything was so good. Everyone kept telling me, your leg looked so great. So, like, that's what I was hanging on to. And, like, I thought I was getting, like, the most excellent care in the world. Like, I was set up to do this, like, magazine shoot where they were coming to my house to, like, take pictures of, like, the great care I got and all of these things. And So at this point, I'd had like, I don't know, like 36 physical therapy appointments, had like 50 prosthetic appointments. So I was like, they are just so, like, they just get me in whenever they need me, like all of this stuff. And at this one appointment, I was like, man, you know, I don't understand, like, why this is not working, like, why I'm having such a hard time. And the prosthetist was like, well, if she wouldn't have cut it shorter than it was supposed to be, like, it would be okay. And I was like, what did you just say? He's like, well, yeah, like, you know, it should be down here, and all this skin wouldn't be down here. And he's like, but you knew that. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. Like, you know those like movie aha moments where like your whole, like you see like their whole life goes like zooming by you? Like this was me in that office. Like, this is a joke, right? Like someone is actually joking with me right now. And I left there and I was like, my head was spinning. I remember calling the reporter, and I was like, you can't come to my house tomorrow. I'm sick. I wasn't sick, but I was literally about to throw up because I could not believe what I had just heard. So again, here I thought this was all me. Like, I wasn't doing something right. I was screwing this up. You know, like, still on pain meds, and people were like, oh, you're just always looking for an excuse to, like, have more pain meds. And, you know, it was just always my fault. So I got a hold of my surgeons that were at the other hospital, and I was like, can you, like, this is what I just heard, like, I need you to, like, figure something, like, I'm freaking out here, dude. And he gave me his personal cell phone, like, back in the day, because if something was wrong, I could text him, like, that kind of thing. And he's like, send me a video so I can see, you know, what's going on. And he was like, you need to get here right away. He's like, we need to fix that. That's not at all what it's supposed to be like. But like, how many people do you know that have an amputated leg where you could be like, hey, let's compare these, right? Like, I don't know what I don't know. Like, so I'm like, this is a joke, right? Like, this can't actually be happening. Because it was only my foot, you know, like, it wasn't my leg, it was my foot and my ankle. So, you know, and I remember her saying, like, it would be about halfway between my ankle and my calf, and I was like, well, that seems a little on the shy end, but 2 inches, like, holy cow. You can Google it and see it's supposed to be like 15 to 17, and mine is 7 centimeters. So then I had to go back to the hospital, and they basically had to redo my whole amputation and start back over. So they took the muscle and flipped it up, and they like drilled like holes in my bone to attach the muscle because it was just flapping there. And there was a lot of things that weren't connected that were supposed to be. So my surgeon came out when he had redone it, and he was livid, to say the least. But I was like, okay, like, here we go again. Like, let's try this again. And went with like a new prosthetist and all of that. But along the way, like, everything was always, well, when mom gets better, we'll do this. When mom gets better, we'll do that. You know, like, I was never able to hold my son again. Like, I couldn't pick him up and carry him around because I couldn't walk. So, like, to not have that was heartbreaking. Like, it was so hard for me. But we figured it out, right? Like, we figured out that he would snuggle with me instead, and he was my snuggle buddy. Sometimes still is, and he's almost 13. And he's not afraid to, you know, climb in my bed and lay there for a little bit until he feels better. But again, like, our lives just were on hold. It was like we're on hold because you never knew if I was going to be in the hospital or not, or if my leg was going to hurt or not, and it was crazy. And all of a sudden I started having like these horrible, awful pains. I remember, so at this point with my career, I had, worked in residential. I was running the place. I worked in there for 13 years. So I was like the supervisor of the program. And the day I had come back from my surgery, they were like, oh, we're going to close your program, by the way. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, because given my heart and soul to try to keep this, for those of you that work in that area, like trying to keep a residential treatment center open in this area was huge. And it meant a lot to me. So to all of a sudden not have that in our community anymore was already a devastating blow. But then they're like, well, but we've got a place for you to land. And it was outpatient therapy, which it was a blessing. Like when you work in residential for that long, and I was on call 365 days, I was always on call. Like even when I wasn't on call, I was still on call. So that was, besides the major pay cut, was a blessing in disguise of just a lot less stress. So being a therapist was, that seemed so easy compared to that. But so I remember this one time I was with a client, and all of a sudden, I would get, like the phantom sensations where I could feel it, and, but I could usually like tap my leg or something to like kind of get it to go away. And at this point, like I could wear, a prosthesis for at least, portions of my day. So I could walk a little. And I remember being there, and all of a sudden it was like this pain came over me, and like I had to like stop the session because it was so bad. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so sorry. Like I don't want this to be about me, but like I just need a second. And it just continued to get worse and worse. And over, the months kept happening. But at the same time, like life was still going on. So like I needed to figure out like, how do I keep going? How do I still make this the most normal life I can for my kids? And at that time, there was an opportunity for us to go to California. My husband had family there, and so I was like, you know what? We're gonna stop like waiting for mom to feel good. I don't know if I'm ever gonna feel good, and I don't know what is in store for me. So I'm gonna plan this trip. So I plan the trip, go to the doctor, beforehand, because I'm like, this is not, like, I don't know what's going on. And they're like, well, we think you might have a neuroma. I'm like, what the heck is a neuroma? I'm like, well, it's this nerves like to get back together and basically form this cell. And it's like a tumor, only it's not, but it's just all these cells that are nerve endings that come back together and have a party is basically like the easiest way to describe it. But the crazy part, like it was dealing with my sensory nerves. So like when I would get irritated, it would get worse. So, having a 4-year-old little boy and a 7-year-old little girl, you don't ever get irritated. But, I was like, we're still gonna go. We're still gonna go do this vacation because we all need it. And we went out there, and like, I still remember just stepping on the beach and like being able to go in the water with my kids and my husband and just stand, because I could wear that leg during that time, and looking up at the sun, and there, how there's like those like rainbow things that come, like it was straight out of a movie, like it was beautiful. And I was just like so happy, and like I wanted to show my kids that like no matter what is going on, you can find a way to get through this. And yes, there's going to be stuff that is hard and is tough to go through, but together, like, we can figure it out. So we went on this amazing trip. We did, like Disney and Legoland and San Diego, and, I lived in California for a while when I was little, and I cry every time I leave because it's just so beautiful to me with the mountains and the beach and all that. So being able to experience it with my kids was amazing. So I had the surgery, and I was like, okay, like, here we go. This is going to be it. We got it this time. A few months later, these pains come back again. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what is going on? And like when I wear a leg, it makes it worse. And if you put things on it and squeeze it, it makes it even worse. So back to surgery, I went again. And that time, like, a nerve was not where it was supposed to be. So I had to have another surgery. So in total, I ended up having like 3 more nerve type surgeries. And with each one, it was just never seemed to get better. And so the last one I had was in 2018, so over 5 years ago. And I've tried multiple times to get back into a leg. But at one point, I was seeing these doctors, and I went from working, almost full-time to having to go down to part-time because I was giving all of my good energy during the day to my clients. And I had nothing left when I would get home. And I would take it all out on my family, and I felt terrible. Like I didn't want to be that mom or that wife. So by cutting my hours, I was able to have more of that back and get to spend more time with them when I did feel good. Which, like for so long, like that is our identity, is what we do for a living. And I just continued to have more and more pain. I had to wear my leg less and less. And at one point, they finally brought up, maybe you need to think about doing disability. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, do you know how many years I went to school for this? Like, and now you think I want to like do disability? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that is not my life. I remember when I first got it amputated, this nurse goes, oh my gosh, now you can like be on disability. And I was like, you think that sounds fun? Like, no, again, no offense, but like, ew, like I want to work. I love my job. But it got to a point where I couldn't do it. And, when with the weather and all of a sudden I can't walk and I'm trying to, get here and do that and do this, and I would fall down and it was dangerous. So, I ended up having to swallow my pride and figure out that like that was what was best for me, to be able to still contribute to my family, to be home with my family, and to have different insurance and things like that. So I was able to, around that time, a little bit after, was when I also got asked for adjunct teaching. So I was able to start, being a professor at Whitewater, and just doing like one class a semester is like about perfect for me, because it gives me the time I need to still be with my family and still be able to do something that means so much to me. And so when COVID happened, that was kind of like a blessing and a curse for like professionally, right? I was able to all of a sudden realize, oh, I can also like see clients from home. Like there's this telehealth thing. So I was able to start doing more things that I loved again. Because like that cup for me was really empty. And I realized how much, it wasn't just a career for me, like that's what I need to fill back up also, so that I can also give that to my children. These last couple years have been probably one of the craziest that I've been through, even though I've been through all of these other things. I ended up getting divorced last year, and it's been a whirlwind. It was not at all what I had planned for. But looking back, I realized how unhealthy and toxic of a relationship I was in. And I didn't want my kids to think that that's what love was. And so, it's a process. and learning how, when you're told no one will ever want you, no one will ever, want to be with you, you're too much. As much as you think that you won't think, like, you're above thinking that, if you get told that enough times, it starts to sink in. And honestly, I can tell, there's still times now where that part of my brain gets lit up and I get stuck on that. But it's not, I know that's not true, but it's using like therapy techniques on myself, which is terrible because I am like, I do have an amazing therapist. I think everyone in the world should have a therapist. I don't care if you have anything wrong or nothing wrong. Everyone needs a safe space to be able to talk where people don't know who you're talking about. But it's helped me to get to where I am now. And, being able to speak again and share my journey with other people, I realized was also something that like really gives me meaning and purpose. And, I didn't end up doing it during COVID because I just was like, it felt so overwhelming because I was also like trying to be a homeschool teacher to my kids, which was like a disaster, and I hated it. So I was like, trying to do one more thing is just not happening right now. So I was kind of on hold for a little bit, but just so nice to be able to get out. And for me, this is like, every year I've done this, there's been a different theme, right? One year it's hope. One year it's, I can't even remember all the ones that it is, but whatever way it was, it always seemed to fit with the things that I have been going through throughout my whole life of, no matter what happens, that you don't give up. Never give up. That was another year. For those of you that have come here multiple years, maybe you'll remember these with me, but, never in my life would I think all the things that happened to me would have happened starting from when I was 15 till last year. But it gives me a reason, like, I find purpose to get up every day. Today, granted, I've probably complained a little, like, because my daughter has double basketball tryouts today, so I'm dropping her off at the high school at 5:45 in the morning, but, being able to be there for my kids and to know that I'm giving them the best example that I can. I still have to take pain meds. That is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. There's shame and guilt and all of the things that come with that too. That's a whole nother session someday that I will hopefully address, but there's so much stigma attached to all of that stuff. But that's how I get through my day. Not like, oh my gosh, I need it to get through, but that's how I can physically get through my day to do all the things that I need to do. So that I can be, and of course my daughter is like a 3-sport athlete. So I live in a gym or like on a field, and like she's super, super good at like what she does. So like, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like, I love it. It's so fun to watch her. Like, I'm booking out, like we're going to Denver and Florida and like all these places. So it's fun to get to travel and do all of these things, but it's a lot too. And there's so many times where, I'm like, I try to gauge based on how I feel whether or not I can get through that day. When in reality, like, we can always do more than we think we can. We always, like, not everyone, but a lot of times we think of the worst possible outcome or the worst thing that's going to happen. The likeliness of it happening is definitely not as much. So, do I still have my days where there's nothing left and I'm freaking out? Like, absolutely. Because now I have 2 basic teenagers that live with me full time. So, like, I don't get a break. I did just get back from Mexico with my mom, took the kids and I, so literally the best vacation I've ever been on because, it was normally we go on these sports vacations, so to actually get to, like, my biggest thing for the week was what restaurant am I eating at and what drink am I having today? Like, those were my biggest dilemmas last week. So, I'm totally on, like, the YOLO mindset. You literally do only live once. So, putting things off and saying, oh, when this is better, or when that is better, or when this, you never know. You literally have no idea what today is going to bring, tomorrow is going to bring. So if there's something that you want to do, or that someone that, like, push them, tell them you can do it. Don't give them all the reasons why they can't, or don't tell yourself all the reasons why you can't. Find the way. Because believe me, like, it is so worth it once you start doing the things that, especially if it's scary. Like, the first time I remember sitting in a room like this, the first time I came and did this, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna puke. And then I got done and I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. So, like, do the scary things and encourage other people too, also, because sometimes, like, they're in their own heads, so they just need someone to be able to help pull them out of it. How are you doing, time? I'm not bad. So, that was a lot of me talking, but does anyone have any questions? Like, literally, I'll answer pretty much anything. Yeah.
Were you angry at the surgeon who? How did you deal with that or process that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I'm sure you were angry after.
Oh, I had some choice words. I actually ended up in the middle of a malpractice lawsuit. The thing about Wisconsin is it's very hard to win malpractice in Wisconsin. It's, like, actually impossible. But I mean, it was like 3 years of it. We were like 2 months away from trial, and my lawyer had even, like, he retired during the process because we just kept getting, like, pushed off, and he was the one that had the most fire kind of thing. And in Wisconsin, like, there's like 3 attorneys, I swear, in the whole state that do this. The one was like, you have to have a doctor that is willing to go on the record and testify that this is not right. I had 3 of them. But when it came down to it, they wanted to keep their jobs more than, so their company lawyers would come in and put a lot of pressure on them. The one in particular ended up getting a form of cancer, so, like, he needed to keep that job for his health care. So, unfortunately, there was not anything that was done that way. They tell me it's a win that there's, if you look up her name, that it will even come up as a malpractice, because a lot of times you don't get that far. But yeah, like, trying to, there's still, like, I get so mad, like, especially when I hear that she wasn't the surgeon that would normally do it. It was a different surgeon. So, like, I get angry at the people of, why would you, like, you make me wait and think about if I want to do it, but you didn't even take the time to meet with a prosthetist to see where the best possible spot was. Like, so many things. And when we were going through that whole process, and listening to her testify in these, like, little meetings, and she's like, well, you can cut it wherever, it's not a big deal. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you're still doing this. You're still doing this. Like, it is frightening to me that this still happens. But that's the protection a lot of times that ends up happening. So yeah, it's still hard. And people be like, oh, have you ever tried one of those, like, prosthesis? I'm like, oh my gosh, no. Like, when we were moving, all of a sudden my daughter's like, Mom, you, like, literally have a bag of legs in here. Like, what do you want me to do with the bag of legs? I'm like, first of all, put that on your Snap story, because that's funny. And second of all, like, let's just keep them, because that's probably a few $100,000 worth of things, but I just can't wear it. So it's a lot. It's hard, being trapped in your own body and having to use a scooter to get around everywhere, or crutches. And sometimes I just sit and look and watch people walk because I'm like, oh, that would be so nice, like to not have to think about how am I going to get inside, how am I going to do this, how am I going to do that. Like it's that mental part of it that just gets so exhausting. So I would say like if I was like rich enough, I would hire a driver that could drive me wherever I want to go. We're close. We're real close. She's got her temps, but she's like, I don't want to drive. I'm like, oh, you're driving. You're driving. But yeah, so there's some small things that I would love to have if I had won the lottery. Yeah.
Did they ever find or prosecute the person who ran you over and got it?
Yeah. So there was a trial. There was 2 drivers. At first, they tried to put the passengers also into it because they had kind of gotten out of the cars and stuff. But in the end, it ended up just being the 2 drivers. And because of how they charged them with intentional homicide and intentional bodily harm, they actually ended up getting off because they were saying that they didn't intend to do that. It was, so if they would have done, like manslaughter or, like something of those lines. So yeah, they did not spend any time in jail. However, I do know that, so I eventually ended up forgiving them, right? Because I needed to do that for myself. I had so much anger and so much hate towards them, but it wasn't doing me any good with that. And ultimately, one of the drivers took his own life. Oddly enough, I knew within 5 minutes of it happening because of a friend who knew my friend who called me. I was like, this just feels weird that I would know this information this soon. So obviously, I'd never talked to them again. I mean, they don't know that I forgive them because I didn't. Actually, I did try to message the one guy. And this other guy answered, and he's like, oh my gosh, you're so sweet. I don't know how you just forgave this person. I don't even know him and I don't like him, but he's like, it's not me and it's a different guy. And last I heard, unfortunately, he still gets in trouble all the time because law enforcement thought it was me once and had a warrant out. So unfortunately, it hasn't changed anything with the one, but yeah, so that was really hard to not have that just didn't feel like justice was ever done in kind of any of the things that have happened in life. So, yeah.
I don't know why you're not just Dean Grant the world and throwing rocks at people's windows all the time. I just came out of a session where we were talking about system failures, and I'm like, oh my God, you're living in a bubble of system failures, and here you are, just resilient and.
Oh, I mean, I have my days. Don't get me wrong, but I always think of it could be worse, right? Right now, my friend's daughter, she's 8 years old. She's fighting bone cancer, carcinoma. She just had to have her leg amputated on Friday above the knee, and she's 8. So I tell myself those things. And what's hard for me though is if I am having a bad day and I do trust someone to tell them when they're like, oh, but it could be worse, and you have 2 beautiful kids. I'm like, well,
That doesn't bring my life.
no shit, Sherlock. All you just did is invalidate everything I just told you, and now I know that you're not a safe person for me to talk to. So, I tell myself those things every day. But today I just needed you to sit there for a second and hold it for me. But obviously that was not something you could do. So, I pick my people of who I share things with. I'm super close with my mom. My mom is my ride or die, for sure. My daughter and I are very close. My son and I are too. We just have very different sense of humor and that kind of thing. But we have a lot of fun together. Sometimes I feel like I'm still 15. I never you know how they say, like, you're as old as your trauma was? Like, I kind of live like a 15-year-old, like, most of the time, so. But, and now I get to buy lots of cute shoes because I can, because I only wear one. So I have a whole, that's what I need. I need to find my, like, shoe match. Because, like, I have so many cute shoes, you guys. I'm not even kidding. And they're all brand new on the left. So.
What about the 8-year-old? Yeah.
In a couple of years, maybe.
I know. I'm trying to think I think we're missing the same one, though.
Do you think
So.
there's ever a time where you'll be able to use a prosthetic or no?
Not unless there's, you know, there's like a surgery out there where they can connect these nerves and stuff like that. But I was scheduled to have it done. And right before that, I had talked to this mom, and she was like, oh, my son's having it done tomorrow. Like, I'll let you know how it goes and all this. And I'm like, okay, cool. So they're finding a lot of success in it when it's done initially, but they don't have a lot of data for it done secondarily. And, like, doctors are floored when I know that, because they're like, oh, you should just do this. I'm like, yeah, okay, well, this woman I met, her son was, like, wheelchair basketball. He was, like, had college scouts looking at him and all this. And after that surgery, his pain was so much worse. And then he started, like, losing his peripheral vision and having seizures. And I'm like, I had 2 kids to take care of. Like, my mom is not going to quit her job and take care of me and my kids. So unfortunately, like, that is just too risky for me right now, unless they can come up with something different, which who knows? You know, I don't count it out, but I also try to not get my hopes up, because I've been down that road so many times with so many doctors that are like, I know what's wrong. So, like, my leg actually, it spasms. Like, it's probably doing it right now, and I don't even realize it's doing it. So that's also why a lot of times, like, if I take pain meds, then it's not as bad. But I'll get these horrible shooting, stabbing pains, and I could be driving, or, like, I don't know when they're coming. And when they come, like, it's bad. Sometimes it's a few minutes, but there's other times in winter and stuff, it can be, like, a couple hours, and it's awful. So I have a little anxiety about, you know, when those kind of come around. So I joke with my kids. I'm like, I got 5 more winters here, guys. And then you're not going to see me here in winter, but you can come find me. I don't know where I'm going, but.
What do you mean?
Physically in Wisconsin, like, where I don't have to be cold and all of that stuff. So yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious, are you still good friends with the girl that helped you opt in initial process?
I am. So when I did this focus thing last month, and they really wanted to focus on the peer pressure part of it. Like, I felt terrible because, so I, for the first time, had it, like, videoed, and I am now starting to putting it out on social media. And I've not put myself out there like that. For some reason, I can come talk in front of all these people, but putting myself out on social media was a lot. So I put it on TikTok, and I wanted her to know it was coming before. Like, I had to call and talk to her beforehand, because I was like, and I've told her, I don't blame you at all for this. Like, this is not, it was, I got on, so I said yes. And it's still really hard for her. But, you know, like, we just have this mutual love for each other. We don't see each other super often, but, you know, I just didn't want her to feel bad about it. But I also, like, I used that to hold me back for a long time of not sharing it bigger. So now I know, and now people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you did this. I'm like, yeah, I've done it for like 6 years, but I don't really tell anyone, because it's easier to talk to strangers than people I know. So yeah, I put it on all of my social media, so we shall see where that goes. I really want to push, my goal this year is to push myself more and put more things out there, and hopefully, you know, go do more speaking engagements, different places, so. All right, and I did it with 3 minutes left to go, guys. Thank you so much.